Hi, everyone, and welcome to Generation 180's Electrify Your Ride Week event, Electric Vehicle Myth Busting, Fact or Fiction? If you're here to learn more about EVs, then you're definitely in the right place. Tonight, we're looking forward to hearing from three fantastic EV owner ambassadors and guest moderator who are here to help us bust some common EV myths. Anyone that spent a few minutes Googling electric cars has likely encountered common misperceptions around electric vehicles. You can't drive in the rain, they're slow, charging is dirty. There are a lot of EV myths out there, but tonight we'll debunk them. Before we get started, I want to tell you briefly about Generation 180. We're a national nonprofit organization based in Charlottesville, Virginia, working to inspire and equip individuals to take action on clean energy. My name is Stuart Gardner, and tonight I'm joined by a fellow automotive enthusiast, Kevin Justima, founder of the car shopping tool CarEd and vice president of the Washington Automotive Press Association. And special thank you to Generation 180 team members Blair St. Ledger Olson and Nate McFarland for working behind the scenes to make sure this event goes perfect. Here's a quick look at the three major focus areas of Generation 180. We're working to flip the energy script, helping move from a narrative focused on climate doom and gloom to a story focused on where we need to go. A world powered by 100% clean energy. A story that says we can do this and we all have a role to play. We focus on individuals in their homes and their communities because your energy matters, because certain behaviors and technologies not only help fight climate change, but also help build the social momentum and the political will we need to get big system level changes. We lead two major nationwide campaigns, Solar for All Schools, which just released the 2020 Brighter Futures Report, and Electrify Your Ride, which works to make EVs more accessible. Solar and EVs are clean energy solutions proven to address two of the largest sources of carbon dioxide, emissions from electricity generation and transportation. As part of our Electrify Your Ride campaign, we host educational events like this one, where people can learn more about EVs. This week is full of online events that are great for EV owners, EV advocates, and the EV curious alike. We have sessions that will dive into cool EV conversions, workplace charging, policy, expanding access to EVs, and much more. There's trivia night, happy hour, and we're even giving away an awesome e-bike. So drop in for a few sessions or stay for all 13. It's all free and open to everyone. So let's get started, but a few quick housekeeping items first. Because of the large number of people joining us tonight, all attendees will remain on mute throughout the event. Please use your Q&A and not the chat to submit your questions, and we'll try to get to as many of your questions as we can in the next hour. So without further ado, let's start hearing from our guests. Kevin, do you want to kick us off?
Sure thing. Thanks, Stuart. And great to be here. I really want to just a huge thank you to Generation 180 for letting me be involved in the great work you're doing and the advocacy that you're creating. It's a very exciting time. I've been a constant champion across my career in the auto sector for innovative product concepts through the voice of the customer. And we have great on the panel tonight, actual customers that we're hearing from that are talking about their experiences. So that's really the right way to do it. So it was very exciting. And I've been fortunate over the career to work among the top brands across the three major auto producing sectors of the world, those being brands from the US, from Japan, and from Germany. So I've seen how all of the auto sector is approaching electrification and what they're really starting to hit home on with that. The teams I've led have been key in implementing and introducing segment leading concepts to date, such as the first Honda Odyssey, Honda CR-V, Acura MDX, the Honda Pilot, Volkswagen GTI and Volkswagen Beetle, icons in themselves, the Honda Accord, of course, and products from Cadillac as well. So seeing how electrification is affecting the mainstream brands and the luxury. And now with CarEd, my mission continues to be to help people, help them make an educated decision by shopping differently, the way they're shopping differently these days, and providing an innovative and unique tool in the form of a quiz that you can see at car-ed.com and take it for yourself and see what electric car you match with even. Based on generating awareness for these models that are in the marketplace that you might not know. And it's all about connecting to the vehicles based on your own behavior, not what people are being pushed and told to tell you about. So with that, I'd like to also meet our panelists. So why don't, if you could kick it off, Elvia, that would be great.
Thank you. My name is Elvia Thompson, and I'm with Annapolis Green. We're an environmental nonprofit in Maryland's capital. And people ask us, well, what does electric cars have to do with the environment? Well, a lot. And the reason that I'm so enthusiastic about driving electric, which I've done for the past 5 years, is because of the beneficial effects to mitigate climate change. I just feel so wonderful. Sometimes I feel kind of superior that I'm driving with no emissions. And when I go someplace with somebody, I always want to drive because I don't want to be in an ICE car. So our nonprofit is really working hard to educate people. And I have found that when you talk to somebody about driving electric and present the views and everything, sometimes it takes a while, but I know for sure that I am responsible for at least one Tesla and one Leaf out there, if not more. It's just a matter of getting people to understand that it's perfectly normal to drive an electric car now and that it's a good thing. So I'm really very excited about being on this panel. And I want to thank Generation 180 also. I think you're doing an incredible job. 13 events, I think it is, in this week. That's a lot. So we're just doing 3 events in Annapolis, and that's a lot. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Elvia. Ron, can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name is Ron Kaltenball. I'm with EVADC. We're a chapter of the Electric Auto Association, one of the sponsors of Drive Electric Week. And I've been an EV driver since 2012. So I've been there from starting out with an 84-mile range Nissan Leaf to the 200-plus mile Chevy Bolt that we got in 2017 and the 300-plus mile Tesla Model 3 that we got in 2018. So my wife and I are a 2 EV family. And I wouldn't have it any other way. I mean, it's just been, people talk about one of the myths that we'll get into in more detail is that you have to sacrifice to go the EV route. And it's just the opposite. They are vastly superior to ICE or internal combustion engine cars. And yeah, there are a few little things you got to do a little more planning occasionally, but the occasional small item you have to worry about is minor compared to the benefits. And one of the things at EVADC we talk about when we do events, which unfortunately we can't do in person right now, EVs have a story to tell for anybody out there, and no matter what your interests are. Whether you care about national security and not sending oil dollars to bad actors, whether you care about climate change, whether you just like fast cars, give me a market area and I can give you a reason why an EV is for you.
Awesome. John, you want to round us out?
Yeah, sure. My name is John Park. I live in Roanoke, Virginia, and I am the founder of the unofficial Tesla Owners Group of Southwest Virginia. Unlike, I think, the other folks on the panel, I come from I'm a car guy, love cars, and so one of the reasons why I bought an electric, especially a Tesla, is because of the performance aspect of the vehicle. For the money, it's really hard to beat the performance of an EV. So that's where I'm coming from.
Awesome. Let's start off, roundtable, everyone answer this question. Was there one particular concern about going electric that you had before going electric? And then how did that get addressed for you? John, why don't you start that? John, do you want to take that one?
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you said Ron. My bad.
Sorry, they're very close. Good point.
So one of the first, I think the biggest concern for most people is, where do you charge and how long does it take to charge? So, when I spoke with an owner of a Tesla, that was one of the first things I asked him. Where can I charge and how long does it take to charge? And once I found out about the, especially from a Tesla perspective, the supercharging network and the amount of speed that those superchargers provide in terms of the how fast it charges, but pretty much, I pretty much said, okay, I think I could sacrifice just a little bit of, waiting just a little bit longer than having to fill up a gas tank to make that sacrifice. I think it was well worth it.
Great, thank you. And Ron with an R.
So yeah, I think range is probably the biggest thing that people face the most, at least in the earlier days, today with our longer range cars, it's not much of a concern for people. But as I mentioned earlier, I started with a Nissan Leaf in 2012, 84 miles of range. But at the time that we were, we still had a gas car, and it was like, well, it's our second car. We'll use it for, just miscellaneous stuff around town. But quickly realized that, this thing can go a lot of our needs. And within about 6 months, I realized it was actually equal in miles driven to our gasoline car. And the biggest frustration was it just didn't have enough miles to be even more so, because it's such a better driving experience. And so now with the Tesla Model 3, I mean, I've been to Vermont to go skiing, Detroit for a science event with my daughter, and there's just no real drawbacks there. Quick point on driving for trips and stuff. Teslas currently are the kind of the champs around road trips because of their network and other factors, but you can drive long distances in the other EVs as well. One of our members went to a EV event in Texas from the Maryland area in their Chevy Bolt, and it worked just fine. Yeah, it would have been a little faster in my Tesla because of the better charging, but it was still very doable in the Bolt, and it works. And it's just going to get better and better as more chargers pop up.
Yeah, and we'll definitely get to a conversation about long distance driving. Elvia, what about you? Any initial concerns that were then soon remedied?
No, not really. As Ron was saying, the average person drives about 40 miles a day. And I had the same sort of range in my first car. I had a Mercedes B-Class that only had an 85-mile range. And at that time, that was difficult because there wasn't as much charging infrastructure as there is now. And we didn't have any level 3 in the Annapolis area at all at that time. So it was very frustrating. But then when I got the Bolt, oh my gosh, it was like getting out of jail, It was just great. And I've driven to New England and back without any problem. And I know we're going to address this later, but people just need to know that, okay, maybe you need to slow down a little bit in terms of, let's say that you're on 95 or something, and you go in to charge your car. And in my case, I can get about 100 miles in 30 minutes. So instead of having a 15-minute, bathroom break and a snack at one of those service areas, it's 30 minutes. So, I mean, at this point, what's wrong with slowing down a little bit? I mean, we all have during the pandemic, and I think it's probably been a good thing.
Yeah, great point.
One thing I was wondering from all of you is how often do you get asked questions about your EV when you're just around and about town, especially pre-COVID? You might have known about it a bit more. How do people in your community approach you about it? What do they say? What do they ask?
All the time. And the first question is always, so how far can you go? Or how long does it take to charge? And, and the answer, of course, is, well, it depends. But yeah, I've had lots of really interesting conversations all over the place, all over town. And I got little chrome letters for the back of my car that says all electric, because, you kind of can't tell anymore. And I think that sparks conversation as well.
I had a cool experience when I got I got the Bolt. I was getting my haircut at my barber, and I mentioned it to him. He was all interested in it. And so when the haircut was over, his next appointment came in and said, hey, I forget the guy's name, I think it was Joe. Hey, Joe, let's go out and see Ron's car. And so his next customer came out with us. He called his wife out, and they were like, well, wait a minute, it's just a car. And I explained all the benefits of it. And they were really thrilled with what I was telling about it. And they just didn't realize, they thought it'd be some kind of weird, odd spaceship work kind of strange thing, but it was just a car that was, better than a normal car. And it was really cool to see how excited they were about the potential.
I'll say a lot of my friends know that I have a performance Model 3. So their first question to me is, when can I go for a ride and send it?
That's awesome.
Great.
I think one of the biggest myths out there is about range and the concern around range anxiety. A couple months ago, there was a report from AAA that said the findings were owning an electric V cures range anxiety. Do you guys agree with that? you know, have you ever actually been stranded because you ran out of range or couldn't find a charger? Can you tell us kind of if that's true, that owning EV has cured range anxiety?
I'll start with that one. I think the real key here is that, well, the biggest issue around this is where you live. So the more urban area you are, the more you're near major corridors, this becomes really a non-issue. It's a little more of an issue if you're in more rural areas because there's just less infrastructure there. But something to Elvia mentioned earlier, you get an EV and then the pace of new chargers going in is dramatic, whether that's Tesla chargers in their network or any of the other networks for any of the cars. There's just more and more all the time. And one of the things I think people, to your point about owning an EV gets over your range anxiety is, unlike gas stations, which are big and smelly and noticeable, EV charging is kind of usually it's smaller. You can't smell it. There's no fumes. And you just don't know it's there unless you need it. So until you have an EV, you're probably seeing lots of charging, but you don't take notice of it because you don't need to.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I recommend for folks to get over that is if you're even thinking about an EV, there's an app called PlugShare. It's plugshare.com as a website or an app for your smartphone. And you look up charging just with a zip code or an address. And just go explore, you know, where do you go to work? Where's grandma's house? And just see where all the chargers are that you don't realize. And that'll help get you to be thinking about, hey, there's a lot out there and this is more doable than I realized.
I mean, that's one of the things that, you know, when people ask about where to charge, that's one of the first things I pull up is PlugShare and immediately show them, you know, how many chargers are actually available in our area. And everyone's like, oh my God, I had no idea. And just like Ron said, it's because, you know, they're not walking billboards necessarily. And unless you have an EV, you're not going to be looking for them. And honestly, I guarantee you most of y'all have probably driven by one, walked by one, and never even noticed that it was there. So it's just one of those things where if you live that lifestyle or, you know, you have that vehicle, you're going to be looking for it. And they're very easy to find.
You know, one of the things I'm always interested about is how a certain vehicle affects your behavior. That's what my quiz is all about. And going electric certainly might change how you approach driving. Elvia, you were kind of hinting at some of that in your introduction. But, you know, how have you found it to go electric? Has it been difficult or has it been burdensome or not? Maybe the opposite? It's been easy? What have your experiences been?
Not at all. No, it's just a different way of, it isn't even a different way of driving. I mean, the car drives like any other car. Yeah, except it's really fast. So one of the things that I found very interesting is people will say things like, well, it's kind of slow, isn't it? And then if I have them in my car, I'll say, okay, hang on. You know, I floor it and they're amazed. And I don't even have a performance car like John does.
Yeah, I find that one of the things about driving electric is that it's just a much better driving experience. I know on longer road trips in the gas car, I oftentimes would kind of get drowsy. My wife drives more than I do on those kind of trips. But now with the EV, between being quiet, no fumes, no vibrations, it's just a much more relaxing experience. And so I don't get as tired driving when I'm in the EV as you would in a gas car on a trip, at least for me.
So Ron, you know, I found the same thing, but I never put two and two together because I always fell asleep driving long distances, but not now. Yeah.
It's amazing.
Well, you know what's great about driving long distances, having a Tesla with autonomous driving is, you know, it takes a lot of stress off of your driving. I mean, my wife and I drive 4 to 5 hours at a time, you know, not most weekends, but at least 4 or 5 times a year. And, you know, having some of that autonomous driving functionality definitely takes a lot of stress off of your drive.
That's it.
Yeah, that's really fascinating. I would have thought it would be the opposite. You'd be more stressed about stuff, but all three of you are saying it's less stressful, more relaxing. Really.
Yeah, and I just want to say, as the only woman on this panel too, I am very happy that I don't need to go to a gas station ever.
Ron was mentioning.
Yeah, I just feel safer. I mean, yeah, I have to get out of the car to charge it, but I don't know. Has there ever been a carjacking from an EV charger? I haven't heard of one.
Okay. Thanks.
Kind of going along what Kevin was saying, as far as has it impacted your daily life? Do you find that, I think that the statistic is, 80% of charging is done at home, but do you find that you seek out businesses that offer charging? So maybe you used to go to one grocery store and now you go to another because they offer charging. Has it impacted your daily life in that way?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And that's something that in my advocacy of EVs that I do tell business people. There's a whole segment of folks out there that will go, if you build it, they will come. And that's true.
Yeah, that was more the case locally when I had the shorter range cars. Now with the cars we have now, I don't need to charge in a day-to-day standpoint, but for travel, I will seek out, hotels that have charging, or I'm actually pleasantly surprised at the number of ski areas in Vermont where they put in charging at the base of the ski area. And so, gee, I'll go this ski area as opposed to that one because I can charge the car there. So it helps a lot on travel, especially.
Yeah, and even other things too, like Wolf Trap National Park for the Performing Arts. There's charging there, and that's just wonderful.
Yeah, yeah.
Have you all found yourselves needing to find an alternative on long trips? You kind of touched on it. You've taken long trips and then more relaxed on the long trips. Have you had to find alternatives, even if it's just like once a year? Or, I mean, some of you have had EVs since 2012, as you said, Ron. Have there been alternatives you need to get, or has it really been 100% it's all handled?
Well, except for, if I'm going somewhere where I have, like fly to the West Coast or something, I really wanted, we were in Mount Rainier area about
long trips in cars,
Yeah. And I wanted to rent an EV, but that just wasn't possible. But no, quite frankly, right now, if I'm leaving from home, with the Bolt, it would work, but with the Tesla Model 3 especially, I can't think of anywhere I would want to go from the Maryland area driving that I wouldn't take the Tesla. It's just a better way to go. And I really encourage folks to, because I know when we got our first Leaf with the shorter range, we were really nervous and really cautious about how far we would go and which stores we'd visit and stuff. But we quickly learned, oh, this can go further than we realize. And you learn that, okay, well, heading north, it's hillier, so I can't go quite as far. But heading west, it's flat, and I can go, my range is a little bit more. Now, for folks getting into EVs today, though, most new EVs are going to be over 200 miles of range. So any of that needing to worry about that level is probably a lot less than it used to be.
To Ron's point, I wish that the rental car companies would get with the program and offer electric cars for rent when we start traveling again.
Yeah. The range is an interesting question, and each new EV seems to have more and more range. I'm wondering what your guys' opinion is. Is there a magic number that, like, once all EVs can do 500 miles, we're not going to be talking about it anymore? Or do you think it's more an issue of education that, hey, we need to let people know, hey, you don't actually drive that much, So do you think it's more a technology issue or education issue?
I think it's both of those, but it's also a marketing issue. I noticed a few years ago that the manufacturers who sell gasoline cars started advertising the range of their gasoline cars. And I was like, well, why are they doing that? Because that was never a thing. And I don't know this for a fact, but it seemed really odd as EVs starting to get into the marketplace. And there were surveys a couple of years ago where 200 miles was a magic number in the public's eye for the range of an EV. But then more recently, that's gone up to 300 miles in surveys. And I just wonder if that's a marketing thing for companies that are, advertising a gas car with 500 miles of range when it doesn't really matter in a gas car. But I think it's psychological. So I think that's a big part of education. And B, it just depends on, technology will eventually make it a moot point. And then also the robustness and completeness of the charging networks will also help put a nail in that coffin and that myth.
Elvia, John, any other comment on that one? Is it education or is it technology?
I think I agree with Ron as well. I think it's, it kind of goes back to this whole thing of if you live with one, you can kind of figure out what you need. And I think for me, because, we do travel 4 to 5 miles outside of where I live, having a car that can do 300 miles, and also having a fast charging network, I think that's more than sufficient, because in reality, how many people are really going to drive that long without stopping?
Right.
I know, I go to Greenville, South Carolina all the time, and it's a 4.5 to 5 hour drive for us. And I know that even if I take my ICE car, I'm going to stop at least once. And so, I think if you have 300 miles, and you can get a decent charge somewhere, then that's pretty much all you need for long distance trips. For everyday driving, 300 miles is overkill. I pretty much charge my car to about 200 to 230 miles, and I drive it for a couple of days, and then I charge back up. So it just depends on what your needs are.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I wanted to make sure we cover also one of the other big myths out there is that EVs are not cleaner than ICE cars. That you're really just changing the source of where the pollution starts from the tailpipe to somewhere else, so it's still up in the air. And in particular, that if you're charging it, it's coming from coal-powered plants. How do you respond to that if that comes up as a topic in talking to people?
Yeah, I just love that one. Because, I have found that the people who say that also are largely climate deniers. And I don't, Ron and I are friends, and he's been talking about how do you talk to climate deniers about that kind of thing. But, the grid is getting cleaner all the time as governments, including Maryland, require utilities to increase the amount of renewable energy that they provide customers. So the grid the amount of coal is going down and will continue to go down. And for me, the emissions on the road where I am, where I'm breathing, where we live, work, and play, as opposed to the power generation plant. Well, if you're not driving an ICE car, then that part of your life is going to be cleaner at the same time. So I think that to say that it's ridiculous to get an electric car because of the amount of coal that's in the grid is a non-starter.
And there's data to back this up. Stuart, do you have that PDF file?
Yeah, Nate's bringing it up. Perfect.
Nate? So this is some maps. The source of this is from the Union of Concerned Scientists, and they've done some studies. And I just put this together in a nice, visual. And basically, this is showing the grid is actually an interesting topic, and it's kind of a weird thing. It's not state boundaries really. But you can see down here in 2009, the darker the color, the more pollution you have from the grid charging an EV. So the way this works is this is showing for each different grid what miles per gallon a gasoline car would need to get to be as clean as an EV charged from the grid. And so in 2009, you can see the light blue is basically above 50, so Prius territory, or much higher, and the darker blues are worse than that. And you can see that there's a lot of light blue, but there's some spots here that are in the 25, 30 mile per gallon range. But by 2014, a lot more light blue, lesser of the darker colors. By 2018, almost the entire country is in that light blue range. And you're seeing a lot of numbers there, like 102 miles per gallon a gas car need to get to be as clean as the grid, or over 200, or Texas is like in the 60s. So the grid's getting cleaner. Now, what's great about this is the car you bought 4 years ago is also getting cleaner, even though you did nothing to it.
Yeah.
So it's not just the future cars getting cleaner, but cars that are already bought is getting cleaner. And so there's all kind of charts that UCS has on this, and it really just shows that that whole argument around coal is just it's a false argument. And one of the reasons for that is because it's just so much easier, even with a dirty source, to control several hundred sources than the millions of sources when it comes to cars.
Right.
That plus the efficiency of EVs.
Man, that's fascinating. I wish some mass market somebody had published this somewhere just to see those figures for MPG there.
Yeah, well, it's just funny
Huge,
that,
they're high.
yeah, and it's actually, we can talk about this for electric buses and for all kinds of things. And actually, I was talking to Blair earlier. I just happened to put this together this weekend, not knowing this would come up. And so one of the things that I hope to talk about Generation 180 about is actually marketing some of this, because it's just not that well known.
Yeah, like car is all, it's car education, and this is like huge educational piece. Wow.
Which
Thanks for
the
sharing that.
manufacturers are not doing. They're just not doing that at all. They continue to advertise to huge expense on national television their gas cars, and or they'll advertise their whole stable of cars, and then maybe show 10 seconds of somebody plugging one in. Oh, by the way, it's electric, but we really don't want to talk about that. Yeah, it's just amazing to me.
Yeah.
Wow.
Speaking of plugging in, do you think that whole concept is a deterrent to someone who's considering an EV? Like, it's unfamiliar to me. The charging equipment seems complicated. Maybe it seems expensive. It's fancy equipment I don't understand. What do you think about that? Should that be a deterrent to people? Is it difficult?
It's like plugging in your cell phone.
Yeah, I mean, it's not difficult. But it's just different. And so, Stuart, you mentioned earlier about education, and a lot of this it really is education. I would love to have a dozen EVs around that I could lend out to reporters and officials and the public and let them really experience it. Because I was talking to somebody, I think it was from Nissan several years ago, and their mantra was butts in the seats. You get butts in the seats, and they experience it, and they realize, oh, this is like, it's driving a car and it's familiar, but it's also just better in almost every way. And so you just got to get people out there. And to Elvie's point about advertising, the car manufacturers are in a tough spot. I mean, they make their bread and butter money over their gasoline cars, and they don't have enough capacity to sell enough EVs to start pushing them yet. But hopefully, we're only a couple of years away from them having that enough capacity to where they start touting the advantages and doing the right marketing that would reach more people.
I think the tipping point is going to be when Ford comes out with an all-electric F-150, or the Ram trucks or whatever. When it's a pickup truck.
Yeah, well, Ford's announced the F-150 in about, I've heard different numbers, anywhere from a year to 3 years. We'll see what happens, but they are talking about it.
Yeah, and they have a prototype already. Yeah.
The problem with traditional auto manufacturers is, their bread and butter is maintenance.
The dealers.
Yeah, the dealers. That's what I'm sorry. Yes, the dealers. And so why would a salesman or a sales manager push an EV, which is not going to bring them any revenue on the back end? And especially when you have to give, special training to your salespeople. I know Cadillac, for one, is starting to do special training for, I guess, their new EVs coming out in the near future. And then they also, the dealership in themselves also have to drop another $200,000 to get the showroom ready for it. So why are these guys going to, spend the time and money to do that? It just doesn't make sense.
Mm-hmm. Are there also, there's a small question that came up, is incentives if you're in you're in a household and in a single family house, but if you're in an apartment complex or something, are there incentives also for getting, as you said, you don't need any fancy charges or anything, but are there incentives for using them in that kind of situation as well? In
a multi-family situation, like an apartment or condo? Yeah. Yes, absolutely. In the state of Maryland. Yeah. Yeah, I know several people who, I live in an apartment as well, and we don't have any charging here, but I have friends who live in those kind of situations where the condo association has gotten together, working with the utility to put the chargers in. And then you get into the whole thing about, so who's going to pay for this? I don't have I live here, but I don't have an electric car. Why should I pay for this out of my HOA fees, But they've managed to figure that out.
Okay. Yeah, that is one of the biggest charging. The charging networks that are out there in the public are growing so quickly. I mean, we definitely use more, but to me, the biggest charging issue is for multi-unit dwellings.
And
apartments,
that will also democratize this by making it possible for people with lower incomes who often do live in multifamily situations to be able to have electric cars.
That's a great segue. What are your responses to, and this goes with some of the questions we're getting from the Q&A. What's your response to people who say like, oh, EVs are only for the rich? You know, kind of prove to me that that's not true.
Ron, can I show the chart, or why don't you do it? The EV info chart?
Oh, I don't know if we have it keyed up to show, but
I have it keyed up. Can I share screen? Is that okay?
oh,
There it is.
Yep,
There it is. See, Gen 80 is ahead of everything.
Appreciate that. Thank you, Alva.
Yeah, so if you go to the page where these are all electric, see the yellow line there that's about halfway down? That's the average cost of a gas car in the United States, more or less. The cars above that line are cost less, and the cars below cost more. So when you combine this with the used market, which is very robust right now, they are affordable. They are affordable for just about everybody.
Yeah, the biggest issue on EVs from a cost standpoint is that there are some potentially a higher upfront cost for some models than, say, an equivalent gasoline car, but you save so much more over the life cycle of the car. So for some people, that may be a challenge because they can't, for financing reasons or whatever, do that. But a lot of that is perception. So just like anything, I mean, cell phones used to cost $5,000. And they've, obviously, and now you get them for free depending on your plan. So for example, when the Teslas come out, the early Teslas were in the 100,000 plus range. But even then people were, I saw a reporter talking about it and then mentioned that it cost 200 grand when it was like 110. So people just get this perception that they're for the rich, that they're expensive. But like with any segment of cars, there's expensive ones and there's not so expensive ones.
Sure.
And my response to that is I point out to my people ask about the expenses. My Tesla Model 3, 300 miles of range, all-wheel drive, is about the same price as the average Ford F-150. So yes, it's not a inexpensive car, but a lot of people are buying those. And my cost of ownership is far less than that Ford F-150. So.
Yeah, and the Model Y now, for people who want an SUV, the first Tesla, the Model X, is a pretty expensive car, as you can see here, but the Model Y is not. And I have seen so many of those in the past few weeks that it's just amazing.
Yeah, certainly the new product coming out is all at or targeting to be below that average line you have.
But this is mainstream now, because look in the top right-hand corner, the Harley. that should tell you a lot. Yeah.
Can I just piggyback onto this conversation? Was any of your, we talked about the cost of ownership. Someone mentioned cost of ownership, lower cost of ownership. Was saving money a number one? John, we heard your number one purchase reason, but was that the number one purchase reason for anyone else, saving money, or was it something else?
It was the reason my number one was I think maybe Evie probably heard this too, was climate change and the air quality benefits, but the cost savings allowed me to do it. So.
And piggybacking off that as well, has anybody's insurance gone up versus other cars, or have they changed from electric to electric? There's some questions coming through.
Yeah, I was just about to answer that in the chat and type an answer there. I was very surprised. I was actually, we mentioned about worries earlier, and I forgot about this. I was a little worried about the insurance on the Tesla, but surprisingly, no. I mean, right now, prior to having our two current EVs, we had our gas cars were older. So our insurance went up somewhat for the two cars, but only because now we have newer cars instead of having older cars. I was pleasantly surprised that the insurance rates were not dramatically higher, even with the Tesla. And actually, the Tesla and the Bolt are not that far apart either, even though Tesla's more expensive. So definitely reach out to your insurance agent. If you're seeing a super high price, shop around, because I'm not seeing that at all with the other cars you've had.
There are actually
Can
some states, Florida comes to mind, that there are pro-EV policies that specifically prohibit an insurance company from upcharging due to like new technology. So I think that's on a lot of people's radar.
I'll give you guys a comparison. I also own a 2015 Volkswagen GTI Golf, and when we first bought the Tesla and got a quote on the car, it was actually a little less expensive than my GTI, which in terms of cost is less than half. I mean, it's half of the cost of my Model 3.
And when I got my first EV, the Mercedes 5 years ago, my insurance company didn't have that car in their catalog. They didn't know what to call it. They didn't know what to do about it. So it was actually written up as a different car because they had nothing to go with. And I lease my car, by the way. I don't own it. So that's an alternative as well.
Can we, before we get to some of the other questions coming in, can we talk about performance in general? I've heard some of you say some of the questions people ask you in your community are like, hey, that thing looks slow. And John, you've mentioned you got it for the performance reasons. Can you talk a little bit about some of the myth that electric cars are not fun to drive?
Yeah, I think a lot of that myth comes from, unfortunately, back in the day when the Toyota Prius came out and everybody, most Toyota Prius drivers weren't exactly very fast, but I think that was kind of built into the car in itself. And so I feel like a lot of that has translated over into EVs. And, some people compare them to golf carts. And I can understand that, but once you put somebody in the seat of a Tesla or an EV in general, and you mash that go pedal, it's game over. I mean, that's pretty much how I was sold. I was talking to a gentleman at a EV meetup in Richmond, and he took me for a ride in his Tesla P85D. At the time, I don't think Ludacris was quite out yet, but it was in insane mode, and he just mashed the throttle. My eyes went cross-eyed, and I got out of the car. I told my wife, I was like, I'm going to buy one of these one day. And then within a month or two is when Tesla said, hey, we're going to bring out a Model 3. And from there, that was it. I was sold. So.
Yeah, one of the things that's impressive about the performance of the EVs is not just the acceleration off the line, but it's also even at speed. There's just that acceleration just keeps happening. So if you're on the highway and you're in 65 miles an hour and need to pass somebody, you still have plenty to get up and go, far more than a normal gas car. And I've had at least two experiences where I can remember where the sheer performance of the Tesla saved me from being hit. Mm-hmm. And somebody cut me off, and I was able to do a maneuver and accelerate and change lanes that I would not have been able to do in most gas cars. And so it did save me from an accident on one occasion. But the stat I like to quote to people, because I looked this up when I had the boat, I was trying to talk about performance and what's an iconic car that people would recognize that I could compare it to. And I was looking around and I saw that this is going to age me a little bit, but for those who remember Magnum PI from the 80s, that red Ferrari he drove, the Bolt is 1/10 of a second faster at 60 than that Ferrari. My Model 3 is 2 seconds faster than that. And John's performance Model 3 drops by another second, maybe 1.2 seconds. So
yeah, the new Magnum needs to get with the program.
Yeah.
And
I have a story for you though, just real quick. Just this is about performance. So a friend of mine had his midlife crisis Corvette, and after me talking to him over and over and over about electric cars, yeah, he got a Tesla. He's on his second Tesla now. He traded the first one in because, oh, don't you know, it didn't have a sunroof. Yeah.
So one of the things another thing I'll address about the performance aspects of EVs in general is, a lot of regular ICE vehicles, when you hit the throttle, you have to typically wait for the transmission to shift. You have to wait for the revs to build up, or if it's a turbo, you have to wait for the turbo to spool up. That's one of the things that you don't have to worry about in an EV. if you want it to go, it's going to go as soon as you touch that accelerator. There's no, you know, hesitation or waiting a second before everything gets into sync. It's there. You know, I almost feel like it's an extension of my mind where I say, I want to be in that gap. So I hit the throttle, I'm in that gap. So that's one of the differences between an ICE vehicle and an EV.
Besides the speed, what other performance things, you know, does it
One of the great
feel
performance,
it's fun to drive? Is it handle the same?
yeah, the one of the great things about the EVs is, so in efficiency wise, it's a bit of a, it's not the greatest thing, but from a performance standpoint, the weight of the batteries and the batteries being heavy, and in most EVs, they're down low and they're basically underneath the main part of the car. That makes for a very low center of gravity. And so now the Bolt is not designed as a performance car, and it doesn't have, you know, tires that are going to give you a performance edge, but it still handles very well, and it's very quick and very nimble and everything. The Tesla, my dual motor Tesla, is just a windy back road with the stereo going is a lot of fun, and sometimes I gotta make sure it's not too much fun. But they just, that low center of gravity, you can take turns at a much, you know, much faster than we can in an ICE car, and still be, and actually and be safer doing it, even if you might not be entirely legal.
So,
Regarding that, go ahead, John. Sorry.
I was going to say, for those of you who did not watch Battery Day for Tesla's Battery Day, Tesla just announced the Model S Plaid Edition, which is going to be 1,100 horsepower, 0 to 60 in under 2 seconds, quarter mile in under 9 seconds. And then they have also run Laguna Seca at 1:30 seconds, which right now the production vehicle record, I believe, is 1:28, which is, I think, set by a Porsche 911 GT3 RS. And Elon just said that they've probably got another 3 seconds they could shave off of that car. So, you know, it can go fast in a straight line, but they can also go fast around the turn.
Yeah. Ron, you mentioned the lower center of gravity, and I've heard that electric vehicles do surprisingly well in like wet and slippery conditions or in the snow. So I'm wondering if you guys have experience in driving in the snow, and then the second part of that, if you're driving in the snow, have you noticed any big changes? This is one of the Q&A from the audience. Any big changes in your range in extreme temperatures, hot or cold? So kind of a two-part question there for everyone.
Yeah, whenever I actually waited a couple extra months for my Model 3 because I wanted the all-wheel drive version because I like to ski. And I've been to Vermont a couple of times. And I was really hoping for a nice big dump of snow to drive the Tesla in, well, and for the skiing. But the one time I did have about 4 or 5 inches of snow, and quite frankly, I didn't even notice it. I mean, it was just so much nicer to drive in. And also the cold and the impacts are, there's some good news and some bad here. So one of the good things is I got all ready to go in the morning. While I was eating breakfast, I used my phone app to warm the car up. I walk outside to a warm car and I could drive away immediately. Whereas other people who were there, it was this day, it was like -4. With their gasoline cars at -4, you kind of have to let it sit and warm up the car for several minutes. I warmed up the cabin for 30 seconds or a minute for me, but the car could go immediately and didn't care. Now there is some range loss when it's colder. That's true. But again, it's manageable. It's not that crazy, but the car itself in extreme cold is an advantage potentially over ICE cars that just don't do well in the cold.
Yeah, and the other thing that happens when you warm up a car in the winter like that is all that exhaust seems to just sit there and choke everybody. And certainly that's not the case with an electric.
You know, since you're bringing up the choking everybody and stuff like that, there's some other environmental concerns are coming up among some of the questions coming in, especially about concerns about mining the stuff that's used in batteries. Can you guys talk about that? There's some people saying some of the materials in the batteries can't be reused and things like that. So comment on the environmental impact of batteries.
Yeah, I haven't studied this in enough detail to have the full answer on this one, but I have seen enough to know that it's kind of interesting that the impacts of some of these materials get talked about for EVs and new sustainability solutions, but not for the existing stuff that's already out there. So for example, cobalt is a big topic around batteries. And a lot of manufacturers are working to get the cobalt out of their battery chemistries, and that's well on its way to happening. But cobalt's used in a lot of other places too, including, I think, in the refining process and parts of at least that supply chain around gasoline. And that doesn't get talked about. So it seems like and I'm not to diminish the impacts, and they are real and they need to be addressed. But these impacts exist all over modern society, but we only seem to worry about them in the new EV or sustainability space, which is a little bit disingenuous. But the batteries are those materials are valuable. There are companies working on how to recycle them,
including Tesla.
Including some third parties, including some ex-Tesla people who've started new companies. The challenge right now is there haven't been enough EVs around for long enough to have old batteries to need to do that at scale yet. So those processes aren't there yet. But the great thing about batteries is before you recycle them, you actually give them a second life. So batteries can come out of the car and be used in powering backup for a cell tower. I know Toyota did a project a couple years ago where they took like 50 old Prius batteries and powered a fire tower for forest rangers. So you typically a battery's going to have a life in the car and then a second life doing something else, and then get recycled. So we have plenty of time to get that third life figured out by the time we get there with mass quantities of batteries.
Yeah, and I would say this morning we had two experts on batteries and some of the environmental challenges around electric vehicles. We had a great conversation this morning, and we're going to post that full interview on our channels. So I would recommend, for more information, definitely look and listen to those experts. Someone who founded Earthworks, and then a battery expert from Volkswagen Group. So definitely a good resource to find more information on that topic. We're at about, we got about four minutes left. We just launched the final poll. I'm wondering in the last couple minutes, if people could talk about why they think a lot of these myths persist. Is it that some are completely false or some are partly true, and this is something that we got to work on to educate people on? Why are there so many myths out there? So each of you, please take a turn.
I think some of that is
John. Yeah.
I think a lot of that is mass media. Anytime, and I think some of it is because EVs there aren't that many of them, and so I think one of the questions that came up was, what about fires with the batteries? I don't know the statistics right offhand, but many people have addressed this over the recent years, and there's definitely way more ICE vehicle fires than there are fires from battery electric vehicles. So, I think it's, nobody's going to go on NBC and say, oh, hey, this gasoline car caught on fire today. Who cares? But if a Tesla catches on fire, it's going to be front page. So I think some of that is, just perception and just, mass media covering it. So,
yeah.
And again, I think fossil fuel companies are also maybe pushing that a little bit too. So there's definitely room for education.
It's great. Ron, you want to take a shot?
Yeah, I think John touched on the advertising piece, and I think that's a big part of this. I mean, Ford alone spends about $2.5 billion a year advertising vehicles, most of that trucks. If you gave me 10% of that to advertise EVs, this would take off. I mean, there's just not that much advertising around them. And so most of the advertising around EVs is word of mouth. It's owners. Yeah, EV drivers are one of the few people that are willing to spend their time selling somebody else's product for nothing.
Yeah.
just because they love the experience. And so it's that seeing the neighbor get one, and it's just reaching a critical mass so that people understand that because most people just don't have heard that much about it. And so it's education, I think, is the key.
Elvia, you want to take the last minute? What do you think? Why do these myths persist?
I think people are afraid of anything that's new, and also our American attention span is about 10 seconds. So the more education sessions like this that we can have, but not only, we don't want to be in an echo chamber, we want to reach people where they are. I mean, wouldn't it be wonderful to go to like a, muscle car show and talk about EVs if they would let us in. So I think it's just
good idea.
Yeah, I think it's just fear of change or and not paying attention. But they're going to have to pay attention because manufacturers are going to stop making ICE cars.
Yeah.
There have been several already that have said that they're going to do this, Porsche being one.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, we're right at 8 o'clock, so I want to thank you all very much. Elvia, Ron, John, Kevin, our special guest host, and Nate and Blair in the background there. Thank you so much. We got a lot of questions in the Q&A that we didn't get to answer, but we'll definitely answer all those, and we'll be publishing those and putting out a recording of this event. So thank you so much. Really good to see you all, and I hope we busted some myths tonight. And check out, we have for the remainder of the week, we have a lot of good events, converting classic cars to EVs, EV policy, EVs for all, EV school buses. So a lot of cool stuff coming up. So thank you again. And thanks everyone for joining.